Good morning, everybody. Nice. We're all here. Let's continue. So let's just broad brushstrokes. Yep. In terms of what we're talking about and where we are holding at this point in our discussion. So we are explaining. Yes, we are explaining the significance of the fact that three historic events, symbolically and practically speaking, occur on the same day on Shavuos. Number one, of course, is the giving of the Torah. The second is the passing of King David centuries later, and many centuries later, the passing of the Baal Shem Tov. In other words, it involves our three great leaders, Moishe, King David, and the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement before Mashiach comes. So there was a detail I just want to mention that is worth mentioning. Going back to the beginning. We had mentioned the fact that, strangely enough, the Torah does not mention, itself doesn't say that Shavuot is the day the Torah was given. This is actually the subject we're learning about Shabbos morning, the last few weeks at great length. Right? The Torah just says about Shavuos that it's the culmination of the harvest Thanksgiving festival. But there is a hint to the fact that the Torah was given on Shavuos. One hint. And that hint is found, or rather the hint is found in the Torah, but it's recorded, noted by the Jerusalem Talmud, which is, relatively speaking, a more obscure source than the Babylonian Talmud, which, as you know, is the more popular Talmud. Why is the Babylonian Talmud, which was formed later, more popular? Does anybody want to venture a guess? Why the primary study of Talmud is not the Jerusalem Talmud, although that is studied. In fact, interestingly, the Leif Simcha, that's one of the Rebbes of Ger, instituted the daily study of Yerushalmi, which I'm sure his Hasidim and others follow. But the fact is that in the yeshivas and so on, the main study is the Babylonian Talmud. Anybody wants to venture a guess why?
Because it was done like in Galut, Chutz La'aretz, and that's where we are now. And it's like Beis Hillel, Beis Shammai, Hillel, like Yerushalmi later on or something.
Yeah, that's the basic idea. So it's first of all, a few things you said there. You said it's more recent. It came afterwards.
I was saying it's more analytical.
It's more analytical.
How you derive conclusions rather than...
Yeah, it's more analytical because, yes, correct, as Dave says, putting your answers together, it's composed in Golus, in exile in Babylon, and the Jerusalem Talmud is composed in Israel. So putting your answers together, what you're saying is that the Jerusalem Talmud is a higher level of study. It's a level connected really with Israel and redemption, and we're not at redemption yet. So it is a study, but it's much more ethereal. Doesn't address the challenges and the darkness, as it were, of exile that the Babylonian Talmud does. So we need to study both, of course, but in terms of the guidance that we need at the end, we need to look to the Babylonian Talmud, as you say, Hillel Shammai. Shammai is an elevated kind of study, as is the Jerusalem Talmud. And the Babylonian Talmud, the word Babel, the English word Babel comes from Babylon. Why would that be? The Babylonian kingdom was anything but confusion. But it was confusion because the king of Babylon, a very brilliant move, in order to forestall uprising and rebellion, he picked up entire populations and replanted them in different locales, so the people didn't have an association, a feeling for their root, for the place where they were. They were displaced, so their feelings of nationalism were uprooted. And in that sense, confusion reigned. All kinds of languages in different places, and people moved from one locale to the other. So hence the word Babel was born. which is all points to the darkness of exile. Boundaries are blurred, things are not clear on every level, politically, spiritually as well. So the focus, therefore, is the Babylonian Talmud, because we need to work through this and bring light and clarity. And that's the analytical questions and answers and problems and contradictions, which is the way the Babylonian Talmud works. And the Jerusalem Talmud is a higher level of study. I once explained to you, sharing a beautiful story that illustrates the difference, and since we're on the subject, I will do so again. And that is, what are we going to tell you now? A story that illustrates the difference between the Babylonian Talmud and Jerusalem Talmud, and for that matter, the same story will also illustrate the difference between the Rishonim and the Achronim, the early scholars like the Rambam, Rashi, and the latter scholars that followed after, and certainly our own day, which is, we are the latter of the latter of the latter of the latter. So the story, which I've told you many times, and I'll repeat again, is as follows. There was a man, a fellow, a father. He had a child who was this brilliant kid, a genius. And he bested all of his teachers. He was just much cleverer than they were. And the child is growing up obnoxious, because he was smarter than his teachers. He asked questions he couldn't answer. He answered their questions and so on. And so what do you do with this kid? What do you do? So he heard of the Alter Rebbe, the father, the founder of Chabad. Maybe the Alter Rebbe has some solutions. He brings him to the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe asks him, you know how to learn? He says, yeah. He says, good. So the Alter Rebbe goes to the shelf and takes down a weighty tome of the Talmud, Babylonian Talmud, opens to the back. In the back of the Talmud, at every standard edition for now hundreds of years, appears the commentary of Rabbeinu Osher, known as the Rosh, whose commentary forms one of the pillars of the Code of Jewish Law. So the Rosh, in his analysis of the Talmud, concludes with the practical ruling. He concludes with a particular practical ruling and brings a proof from the Talmud that this is the ruling. So he shows it to the boy. It may have been that he wasn't familiar, never learned it before, but in a few seconds he grasped it. Take the average person, I don't know how long, but in a few moments he read the Talmud. Yeah, understood. Yeah, understands. Alter Rebbe says to him, would you agree with me that the proof that the Rosh brings is not a very powerful proof? It's rather weak. He says, yeah, it's not a very earth-shattering proof. Then the Alter Rebbe then proceeded to bring a very strong proof to this ruling, which the Rosh doesn't bring. Now, to follow the Alter Rebbe's reasoning, you had to be a genius. And he finished this whole discourse, which ended with proving the ruling of the Rosh, much stronger proof than the Rosh himself brings. And the Alter Rebbe says to the boy, you agree? I brought a strong proof. He said, yeah, that's a good. Now, to follow the Alter Rebbe's reasoning, you and I wouldn't be able to follow it. Then the Alter Rebbe proceeded to bring a second proof, also even more complex Talmudic discourse than the first. Boy follows it, and he says to him at the end, do you agree? This is another good proof? He said, yeah, Rabbi, it's another good proof. And so he did another 8 times. A total of 10. He would make a book. A total of 10 proofs from all over the sea of the Talmud, from this perspective, that perspective, opinions and analysis and questions, till you arrive at the proof. It's a whole laborious process. If anybody familiar with a pilpul, how it works, you would know. So at the end of each one, the final conclusion is supporting the halachic position of the Rosh. And for each one, they got more and more complex. The Alter Rebbe says at the end of his discourse to the boy, do you agree? He says, yeah. 10 proofs, which of course begs the question, Here you've got 10 incredible proofs, and the Rosh doesn't bring any of them. He just brings his own proof, which to begin with it's a proof, but not so powerful. These 10 were much more powerful, clearer, more solid. So then the Alter Rebbe proceeds to dismantle and disprove all one by one, starting from the 10th, with a counter-argument, even more complex than the 10th, which dismantles it, because you could argue this and that, it's not a proof. As he goes through the first dismantling of the 10th argument and concludes it, he says to the boy, do you agree that I've dismantled it? He says, yeah, you have. He followed it, and then he proceeded to dismantle 9, proof number 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And after each time, and they're all very nuanced, sophisticated arguments, the Alter Rebbe asked the boy whether you agree with my conclusion, and yes, yeah, makes sense, you're right. So the Alter Rebbe then said to him, when it was all done, he says, you don't know how to learn, all you do is agree with me. And I took you 10 proofs this way, and then I took you 10 dismantling arguments this way, and you just agreed to all of them. Now between you and I, to follow the argument, you had to be a genius. But this already deflated him a little bit. But this isn't the main part of the story. What he wanted to is this is the next part, he said, which is why I'm sharing the story with you. He said to the young fella, to the boy, he says, do you think the Rosh went through the process we did? When he wrote his commentary there, he went through all these 10 proofs, but then came to the conclusion one by one that they're not ironclad and they can be dismantled. No. But it's quite important to point out that the proof that the Rosh brings, although not earth-shattering, cannot be dislodged. It's not a tremendous proof, but it is a proof, and there's no counter-argument. That remains. That remains after scrutiny and analysis, that remains. So he says to the boy, do you think you went through this whole process that we did? He said, no. Alter Rebbe says he didn't. And he explained to him, and with the explanation that he told him, which I'm sharing with you now, since we started this Dave and Yeshua Bavli Yerushalmi discussion, it's very insightful to know what the Alter Rebbe says now. The point of it was to engender in this boy a sense of awe and humility when he learns Torah. So here's what the Alter Rebbe says to him. To what can the matter be likened? The way we learn and the way the Rosh learned Torah, which is similar to Bavli and Yerushalmi. Not as similar. The matter can be likened to the following. A person is brought blindfolded into a room that is pitch black, or he remains blindfolded. Very simply, he's in a room that's pitch black, unfamiliar. This room here, for example. And he wants to go out. So how does he get out? He starts to tapavant, he starts to feel. So let's say he comes to this cupboard over here. Oh, this is the door because there's a frame. So the first conclusion is the door, but then he puts his hand further. No, it's a bookcase. I feel shelves and books. This is not a door. So now he comes to the window frame. Now there's a frame, but there's no books. So this must be the door. His hand goes further. Oh no, it's a window pane, not a door. And so he continues till finally he makes his way to the door. It feels it, door, handle, turns it, goes out. Right? So how did he get out of the room? By a process of elimination. This isn't the finally he arrived at his conclusion. That's one scenario. Where am I going with this? What about someone who's in an unfamiliar room and the light is on? And he wants to leave the room. What happens? He just, out he goes. Lights on, that's the door. It's obvious. So that is the difference between the Jerusalem Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, or the earlier scholars and the latter scholars. The Rosh, the story with the Rosh that we just told you, the light is on. Truth is self-evident, and you don't have to go through a whole laborious give and take, back and forth, false starts in order to, it's clear, it's obvious. The light is on. That's the Jerusalem Talmud. Babylonian Talmud, the light is not on. We're in Babylon, not in Israel. And to arrive at truth, it's not obvious. It's a whole argument of proofs and give and takes and false starts and perhaps, and then you finally arrive at it. So that's a much lower level of learning. It's more elaborate. It's longer. There's all kinds of discussion. Babylonian Talmud is this big. Jerusalem Talmud is that big, relatively speaking. Yeah. But, so what are we left with? Which learning is higher? There's higher and there's deeper. Higher is, which one? Jerusalem Talmud. The light is on. Truth is self-evident. It's not a big, long discussion. It's clear, sparse words, few words, simple truth, light. Which is deeper, more nuanced, Babylonian Talmud. So we need the Babylonian Talmud because our world is not a world where godliness is revealed. God is concealed. And to illuminate our world, it's trial and error, and it's given, and it's an analysis, and it's questions, and it's contradictions, and so on, till we arrive at a conclusion, because godliness is concealed. That is exile. So that's why, at the end of the day, if there's an argument between Babylonian Talmud and Jerusalem Talmud, in the conclusion, like you were saying, Dave, Shammai, Hillel, we follow the Babylonian Talmud because not right or wrong. It's not right or wrong. It's the Jerusalem Talmud that's for a more rarefied world. In a world that's luminous, Israel, the Holy Land, that's the way you do it. But in a world where it's darkness and concealed and division, then we have to do it like the Babylonian Talmud. And as Dave was saying, if when Mashiach comes, it's Shammai and Hillel is the same thing, similarly. Mashiach comes, our law is like Shammai. The world had already been illuminated, done, and now truths and so on, transcendent and more lofty and more subtle. So in a sense, we could say the Jerusalem Talmud would be the focus then more. But now it's the Babylonian Talmud. Okay, we're clear? Why did we get into all of this? Because I mentioned the Jerusalem Talmud. Let's go back to it. So what did we say? We said that the Torah itself, this is all parenthesis now, back to the subject at hand. The Torah itself does not mention that Shavuos is the giving of the Torah, except there is an allusion, and where's that allusion found? In the Jerusalem Talmud. What's the allusion? It's a very interesting allusion. When the Torah in Parshas Pinchas, we're going to read it soon. In Parshas Pinchas, we get all of the sacrifices that are brought on every Yom Tov. Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, and all the holidays. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it's all outlined there. Yeah? Now every Yom Tov, including Rosh Chodesh, there is a goat that's offered as a sin offering for atonement. For atonement. Atonement for what? Basically, it's for entering the temple impure, and the person didn't know that he was impure. Could happen. Could happen. He walks over a grave, he doesn't know. Whatever. So there's a sin offering. The way the Torah frames it is, it's a sin offering for atonement. To atone. If you look at the sacrifices that are brought on Shavuos, the Torah doesn't use the word sin, it just says atone, but drops the word sin. Sir izim echad lechaper. Doesn't mention the word sin. But that's what it's for. Atonement means, but it's kind of dropped. It's missing in the. So the Jerusalem Talmud says, because sin Shavuos is the day the Torah is given. So I view it, says God, since you accepted my Torah, I view it like you never sinned. That's the hint. So there's the one hint in Scripture that Shavuos is the day the Torah was given by the omission of the word what? Sin. In connection with the sin offering. The Korban Chatas. Fascinating. Now, just as an aside, and not as an aside, to explore that, we're talking about Shavuos, the giving of the Torah, which is every day. one might ask the following question. On the contrary, if it's any holiday where the concept of sin should be front and center, it's Shavuos, because that's the day we're given the Torah and the obligations, do this, don't do that, and do mitzvahs, don't sin. On the contrary, the idea of the need for atonement because of transgression and sin, when does that kick in? When we got the commandments. What's the Torah all about? If not, do this, don't do that. These are sins and these are mitzvahs, and do the mitzvahs. Understand my question?
Prior to the giving, we shouldn't be accountable, right?
Pardon?
Prior to the giving of the Torah, one should not be accountable.
Right, that's my question. Now you're accountable. So now we're celebrating the giving of the Torah when you become bar mitzvah and accountable. That's the what does a father say? Make my question stronger. What does a father say when his son is called up and his bar mitzvah makes a special blessing? And he says that he's now exempt from culpability, from responsibility to a degree, never totally, because my son is now obligated and bears his own guilt if he transgresses, and for the flip side, of course, the reward for mitzvahs. So it starts when bar mitzvah. The giving of the Torah is many things. It's a wedding, but it's also bar mitzvah. Our sages described it as bar mitzvah. That's really the first and obvious metaphor, because now we become obligated to do the mitzvahs. So if any holiday should mention an offering to atone for sin, it should be Shavuos, because now that's when sin now gets real. Till now you were not, like as you said, you weren't obligated. You're obligated in the 7 Noahide laws, mind you, but not in the laws of the Torah. They weren't given. This is the Bar Mitzvah day. And yet, it's dropped. So the answer, not the answer. This is a very deep answer, and I hesitate to say it because it is often not grasped, but I'll say it anyway. So Hashem is saying, in a very deep way, in the day that we give the Torah, he's like hinting, he's whispering, shh, it's a secret. This whole sin business, don't blame yourself. It's part of my plan. Why is it part of my plan? Because as a result of a sin, you end up doing tshuva and we get even closer. So it's part of my plan for us to be ever, ever closer. So therefore, the day the Torah is given, Hashem is whispering as a hint, very subtle, Jerusalem Talmud. And it's an amazing thing. Where's the one place in the whole account of Shavuos that it hints to the giving of the Torah? The dropping of the word sin. Of all ways to hint to it. Why? It's a very deep, deep, deep message. You're not perfect. I made you that way. It's not your fault. You have Yetzer Hara. I made you that way. Why? Not just to tempt you, that you should resist, because you won't. There'll be times you'll give in. And I made you that way. There's nobody exempt from this. Each one on their level. So why did you make us so flawed? Because through the flaw, we're going to get even closer. It's like the Babylonian Talmud again. Through all of the contradictions and darkness, and then you come out. See, let me go back to the story of the door. Question to you. Who has a deeper appreciation of what a door is? The one who was in the dark room, or the one who was in there's light that went out? Yeah, he understands the door as opposed to windows, a cupboard, and how it works, and the hinges. I mean, he meant whole kinds. Why? Because he was in a dark room, and he had to really struggle to get to that door. His appreciation, understanding. He really internalizes. He's not going to forget that. He might become a door maker after this, a cabinet maker. The other guy, if he took 2 seconds and walked out, he's going to forget. This guy could be a life-changing moment, become a millionaire, making the best doors in the world. Why? Because he struggled through this whole thing. It's like that's the metaphor for sin, the struggle, and all the false starts. Banged his nose in the window. He thought he was going to go out. No, the cupboard here, the bookshelf. He got it bruised in the process because he thought, for sure this is the door. Going through, bang! Yeah, you get bruised, it's not pretty, but in the end, boy, you understand what a door is and what a window is. You might become a builder. He understands now construction like nobody does because he's right the hard way through what's the expression? He went through the school of, how does it go? Hard knocks. If you go through the school of hard knocks, you come out steeled, strong, and you understand the world and you can engage it and use it and be successful. If you live a pampered life, then you're in trouble. Protected life. Parents, it's a very delicate job. You want to protect your kids on the other hand, you don't want to overprotect them. You're not doing them a favor. Which parents tend to do today. They tend to overprotect their kids because they're afraid of their children. What are they afraid of? The kids won't like them. They think they have to be their kids' friends. Huge mistake. Got to be their parents, not their friends. There's an element of friendship, but that's secondary and part of father, mother. And that's what the kids in Eden want. That's what they really love and respect. And they might be kicking and screaming, it's not fair. And at the end of the day, they love you for this and respect you for it. You bring up healthy children. A book was written, I forgot by whom, someone. It's called The Blessings of a Skinned Knee. It's that today's parents let the kid fall off the bike and get a skinned knee. And come rushing in. The whole world turns over in the back. You can't imagine what's going on. How parents react to it. Oh, you're going to make such a big... Hello. This is healthy. The skinned knee. It hurts a bit. You dab it. Of course, you clean it. And back on the bike. And don't make a big fuss out of it. The blessing of a skinned knee. Let the kid learn and experience this. And it's normal and natural in its life. Am I shocked to see the drama for the silliest things? And giving the kids endless choices. You want this, you want that. This is supper and that's what we eat. Mommy made it for you, you eat it. Okay, when I was a kid, it was much stricter. You didn't leave the table till you finished. It was on your plate. And you asked permission. And every meal ended with thanking God and thank you for the lovely meal. May I please leave the table? You didn't pick up and leave. You didn't sit down till father sat. We hated spinach, but we had to finish it. I won't touch it. Mind you, if it's cooked. This is a healthy way to grow up. This is what we're saying. This is what? What were we just saying? I lost a bit the thread. It's part of the big picture. What?
It's the deeper connection.
Yeah, to go through the Babylonian Talmud, that's the deeper connection. You go through. Huh? Oh, yeah. So God is saying, I'm putting you the school of hard knocks, and it's going to be failures and stuff. I take responsibility. I'm removing that word from the Shavuos celebration, the day the Torah is given, because the sin business, me. I put this in motion. Why? We're answering. Because through your sin, and we're going to get ever closer through tshuva. Our appreciation of each other will deepen. That's what's going to happen. Huh?
It's not the primary focus of the giving of the Torah, that you may come to sin if you don't follow these rules. Rather, it's the end game is you'll be closer to
That's right, that's right. You put it very well. So let me rephrase what you just said. You would think that the primary conversation of the Torah would be the finger. You do this, you got to not do that, and if you don't, they're going to be killed, punished. It's there. But the primary thing is the love, the relationship. It's going to be mitzvahs, there's going to be ups and downs, but we're never letting go of each other, and we're just going to get closer and closer and closer. And let's make that as quick as possible, get to the end game. Okay. This was all in parentheses. So there's three things that happened within parentheses. The general theme of our discussion here is the three events that occur on the same day. So Matan Torah, the giving of the Torah. The second is the passing of King David. And the third, the passing of the Baal Shem Tov. So we explained last week, and the last 3 weeks, we'd elaborated upon the significance of the first two stages. Right? So to refresh your memory, before the giving of the Torah, there was division between, you want to say, Yeshua?
Sorry?
Before the giving of the Torah, there was this division, this natural division between, you weren't here last week, it was 2 weeks ago, between heaven and earth, between spiritual and physical, between infinite and finite, which is the most natural division possible. We spoke at length about the forefathers and the nature of their relationship with God, which was purely in a spiritual plane. They did not transform the world, because you cannot make the world godly. It's a contradiction in terms. This is finite, this is infinite. The world is the world. God's God. Heaven is heaven. Earth is earth. And yet, with the giving of the Torah, the whole point is that, that's right, that this natural division is dissolved. How is it possible? We just said it's a natural division. They're incompatible. You can't put ideas into boxes, friends. Can you put an idea into a box? Can you? Trap it? Say, here? Nonsense. And we can laugh at you. Can you get spirituality into a box? For sure not. Even more so. And yet, the tefillin are holy, not symbolic. They're holy. What does this mean? We're used to it because that's what it is. But it doesn't make any sense. It's not a symbol. It is holy. How is this possible? Is because when the Torah was given, Hashem nullified the decree between heaven and earth. And they can become one. Why? Because they both come from Him equally. So if He, the I of God, is revealed, who is the source of spirituality, the source of physicality, if that core common essence, truth, God, is revealed, then opposites become one. Not a contradiction. They are contradiction in their own worlds, but not on the face of their common essence, which is God Himself. Higher than heaven, and of course higher than the world. And from God's perspective, heaven isn't closer and the physical isn't further. From His perspective, it's all a consequence of His will. It's all Him. So when Anoichi, the I of God, is revealed, then the impossible becomes possible. And that's the whole purpose, is to suffuse the physical world with spirituality. Shabbos is a moment in time, and yet it's sacred. Huh?
Nothing yet heard.
Two birds.
So you're saying that the heaven is coming. Yeah. Angels fusing. They're all coming to hear the Torah. Chaverim makshivim l'koilach. What are you laughing? That's what it says in the pasuk. The angels come to hear your voice when you say Torah, because they know now that the essence of God is not, never was revealed in heaven, but here. Starting with the giving of the Torah. So stage one was, it's a three-part stage in bringing creation to the purpose for which God created it. Stage one, Torah. Stage two, King David. Stage three, Baal Shem Tov. That's what we're going to explain now. These three steps in the world's evolution towards the fusion of heaven and earth forever, the Messianic era and beyond. Clear? Stage one is this, therefore. We just gave the overall. It's about the fusion. But there's 3 stages to that, friends. 3 stages to the fusion of heaven and earth, to the spiritualizing, if you like, of the physical world, the body, time, space, and so on. Stage 1 is the giving of the Torah. Meaning, God comes down, it's all metaphoric. There's no up, there's no down. It is metaphor. And becomes, keyword now, please remember it for next week, accessible in creation. His essence becomes now accessible through the physical world, through the physical mitzvahs. He comes down to Mount Sinai, and the eye of God, not God's heavenly manifestations, they can't do that. because they cannot fuse with physical. They're incompatible fundamentally. But the eye of God comes down, no limits, and can fuse opposites, and saturates and fuses all of existence, so that now a Jew comes along and does a mitzvah, can access the essence of God through that physical tefillin, Shabbos, Shem Tov, talis, kosher, and reveal divinity in that moment, in that object. Clear? The empowerment, God, accessibility of the divine in nature, the physical world. That's what happens when the Torah was given. Stage 2 is God's present. Now find him. Here are the mitzvahs. Connect, plug, and bring the divine energy that it will be revealed in creation. But it's there, just tap into it. The mitzvahs thereafter, stage 2, is you and I going around and Jews doing mitzvahs, elevating the world thereby. The potential, the possibility happens with the giving of the Torah. Are we clear on this? And as we started to explain last week, it's already late, King David represents a culmination of stage number 2, which we'll pick up, God willing, next week. I want you to remember that we'll continue our discussion. We spoke last week, he talked about the fact that the sages tell us that God's voice had no echo when he spoke at Sinai. There's no echo. We explained what difference does it make, echo, no echo, yes echo. What's the point? What's the point? It never an echo. It didn't have an echo. Well, we explained that it's a very significant fact being conveyed to us. What is an echo? Echo means that the voice bounces off. Before, right? So before the Torah was given, the physical was impervious to the spiritual, bounced off. It doesn't get going there. Spirituality cannot penetrate the physical, become one with it. That was before the Torah was given. But now with the giving of the Torah, God's voice has no echo. Spirituality can become one, infinite, and with finite, and penetrate and become one. And did. In potential, in essence, just below the surface. Now you and I, mitzvahs, access, transform it. Are we clear? So in a word, what would you say? So what's the great accomplishment of the giving of the Torah? What changed? What changed fundamentally before Torah, after Torah? Before Torah, give me a sentence. Say,
Incompatible, a non-fusion of the physical with the spiritual.
right. So the forefathers, in the relationship with God, they just disconnected from the world. They transcended and entered into the world of the spirit. Spirituality. Study. They didn't use the physical world and transform it and change its status from a physical object to a sacred object. They couldn't. That's why, I've explained to you, they chose to be shepherds, because their whole orientation was disengagement. Meditation, going to a higher place, into the world of the spirit. They went that way, as it were. Disengaged. Give me the opposite word of disengaged. Or transcend. They were about transcendence. What are we about? Integration. Engagement. Using the physical world. Why? Because it's now possible for us since the giving of the Torah. Summarize. But how? Answer this question. It sounds beautiful, but how do you integrate physical and spiritual, infinite and finite? They're incompatible. How does it work? That's still illogical. How does it work? Explain.
There's a fine line. Either you're in or you're out.
But how is it possible, right? How is it possible to fuse them? Anybody listening? You can all share. What did we say? What happens at Sinai? How? Why? You're just repeating again the fact. I'm asking you, how is it possible?
Since Matan Torah, we have the possibility of seeing God imminent.
I haven't heard an answer yet. How is it possible that this can happen at Matan Torah?
We see God's immanence, not only God's transcendence.
But transcendence is transcendence. With the
No,
back
no,
of
we see God's immanence within everything.
missing the almost there. The essence of God is beyond immanence and beyond transcendence. The essence of God is beyond spiritual and beyond physical, and the equal source of both. And therefore, if the I of God is revealed, the essence, which is the essence of everything, then the opposites can become one. We clear on that? No.
He chose to integrate.
Is it possible, Rabbi, that the paradox is possible?
The example that we gave a few weeks ago was, you have two ministers that have completely opposite temperaments and cannot agree on anything and should not agree on anything, and yet when the king expresses his view, they're harmonious. How's that? All of a sudden now they're in harmony? Because in the face of their common source, which is the source of both of them equally, so when the king speaks and expresses his opinion, now they have the same opinion. They're not forcing themselves. It's because they come both from him. They're loyal servants of the king. Physical and spiritual and compatible in their own worlds. But in the face of the source, there's no contradiction. They can become one. Because that's their common source. Okay, friends, we must daven. A wonderful week. Shavuos Tov.
Like boilers.
He can buy.
Shavuot Tov, Rabbi.
Shavuos Tov.
Shikar.
Shkol Tov.
Good to everybody. Rabbi.
No.